I know a lot of the ex-members have expressed interest, everybody from Wayne to Peter, Alfonso. Can you talk a little bit about the excitement you're hearing from ex-members of the band?
I think from those guys, I think they're very excited. I think a lot of them also they feel kind of proud because Weather Report, like I said again, it was such a fan base group, and to see after all these years that a lot of the people that you don't hear as much of, like Alphonse Mouzon, and people who kind of had big names with Weather Report, but kind of maybe went off and weren't maybe as popular as as Avenel, Shorter, Pastorius, Erskine, even Alfonso Johnson, or even Chester Thompson. There's a lot of people that passed through the realm of Weather Report. And I think for them to kind of reemerge through this, because it's part of their legacy as well, and it's also great to have them involved because they also made great contributions, not only to the band but musically as well. So, and to have these guys to come back after all these years and be in touch with them is a great thing, because whether it's like we've kind of always been in touch. The one thing I have to say about alumni, even with Weather Report, is it's kind of like an extended family. You hear from them, you still stay in touch. I've been in touch with a lot of these people for a long time. So, and you would see them on the road somewhere, and so it's nice to see this coming almost in full circle.
And when you say on the road, you put together a fabulous band with the Zavonal Legacy Band, and pretty soon you're going to put some of your live tour music live. I know that we're going to send that out to fans, but talk about your excitement with that group and what they're doing to keep the Weather Report music alive.
Oh, well, the Zavonal Legacy Band actually is really great. That idea actually really started. I was really trying to keep it really people who only really played with my dad. But as you go through the list and you create and you put the band like this together, you kind of realize, actually that list is. I mean, there's many people, but at the same time, there's not that many people. In other words, I mean, when you think about Weather Report, there's only been really, a few bass players. There's been a lot of drummers, and a lot of them some of those early guys are kind of not even playing anymore. I'm talking about people like Skip Hayden, people like this, and so it's really hard to keep it limited. Actually, kind of limited. We were limiting ourselves when we say we're only going to try to keep it people that played with Zavonal. So then when we thought about it more, I said, you know what? The whole thing about the Joe Zawinul legacy is about how he influenced and impacted and was influential to other musicians around the world. And that's how when we got somebody like Adrian Farad, who's a phenomenal bass player, 29 years old, but he grew up living, breathing Weather Report, and he was very influenced by the band, by Jaco, and by Zawinul. And he's like a student. He's like a student of Weather Report. And when we had rehearsals, I mean, he would say, no, I remember the guys, they did it like this, and they had this, and I mean, it's quite funny to see that. And so we decided to extend and say, well, you know what, if we can't get the guys who actually play with my dad, and for all kinds of reasons, sometimes they're just not available because they have their own projects, or some of them don't even really want to go on the road actually anymore. So we decided to extend it to people who were influenced by Zawinul, and because that's also part of the Zawinul legacy was what he left behind. And when we got Adrian, and then we got Katiz Buckingham, who's also a great sax flute player, these young guys, they grew up listening to this music. And it's funny because I had met Katiz Buckingham actually when I was shooting the Yellow Jackets anniversary DVD a few years back. And when Scott Kinsey, keyboard player, we were deciding, well, who should we have for this tour, and we both thought of Katis because he's young as well, but he brings a different approach. And the one thing I like about Katis and Adrian is that Adrian's not trying to sound like Jaco at all, which is great, and Katis is not trying to sound like Wayne. So they have their own thing. And, with Mike Baker, who did play with my dad with the Syndicate, and Bobby Thomas, who not only played, who probably is the only guy that played in every Inception that my dad had, from Weather Report to Weather Update to the Zavano Syndicate. And then, of course, Scott Kinsey, who was a Zavano keyboard student of the unofficial school of Zavano. And together, those guys, I have to say, man, from day one of rehearsal, when we rehearsed in Europe, I could already see right then and there that there was a special connection and a special, right from the jump, from note one, man, they just kind of jumped in it. And it was actually a great thing to see. Very enthusiastic, very open, and of course respecting the music. But at the same time, because it's not the Zavano Legacy Band is not a cover band, a Weather Report cover band. It's its own band. Yes, they're playing music of my dad and Weather Report, but they still have to have their own identity. And I think this is what's very important. Not everybody can do something like this. It's not an easy task. But these guys are so open and so cool that, well, it works. It's working. So, and I have to tell you, man, that these guys, these are some bad dudes, man. They're incredible musicians, and it's a lot of fun to be out with them. And I'm looking forward to for more people to see them and really see how the legacy is even moving forward, and even trying to get to the next generation of people to hear this music, because it sounds as fresh today as it did, when I was 25 years old.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, even Joe, throughout the years, always had so many incredible musicians post Weather Report, and we post a lot of videos that are just, mind-blowing performances. And I've heard this band and heard your recordings, and it just continues. So it's really great to keep the music alive. When it comes to the film, we have a question from someone who wants to talk about the process of construction of the sound and the music. And is the film approach in creating the film any way similar to that? So I guess the question is the construction of the film and the storyline similar to how the music gets constructed, or has been through the Weather Report process?
Let me see if I understand it. Let me answer the question and hope that I understand the question.
Okay.
No, the film, well, you have to understand, first of all, the film really isn't about the music per se. The film is really about two people. Really, as simple as this: two people from different backgrounds, completely different backgrounds, and that had shared one common denominator, and that was to express music in their way. There was never a set plan with Weather Report when Wayne and my father got together. There wasn't a set plan to say, hey, let's do this and let's do that. They just played music. They had an idea what they wanted to play, but there wasn't a discussion to try to be different or to try to be out or whatever. They just wanted to play music and express it the way they wanted to play. So that's really what it's about. The music is an extension of them as individuals, because in their own songwriting, the music is very different, actually. If you listen to Wayne's compositions by himself, very different than the compositions that my dad wrote. But together, they had this language. They had they created their own language basically, and that was the essence of Weather Report. That's how everything came about. So, you know, the storyline is really about them. The music is secondary. The music is the added luxury, you know. So if I was to do, it's like if I was to do a film on Steve Jobs on Apple, you do it on him, and then Apple was just the icing on the cake. The cool thing about doing this documentary is I get to use cool music to support the storyline. So now things happen, how things came about in some of the music, how, there's some great stories on things like how a remark you made came about. But that's not the storyline. Those are just anecdotes, that just happened to happen. But again, the real essence of the story is about Zawinul and Shorter.
Yeah.
And everything in between.
Which is really exciting to hear because it was such a dynamic story of how this band started. And, I mean, these guys were true legends. And then along the path, other people joined up that were, Jaco was really at the beginning of his career, and Pete Erskine, and then later guys like Omar and Victor, and then all the great percussionists that, came along. And so it's almost like these guys were these father figures, much like the greats like, Art Blakey or Miles, and we're very similar in how they created this legacy of amazing musicians who came through. So that's really exciting that you're going to tell the story like that. We have a lot of fans online who are so thankful, and I see a lot of similar names to people that are commenting on here that are also active on Facebook and active fans. Have you heard any stories, particularly from individuals or fans, or anything that you could relay that, somebody's personal story of their experience with Joe or with the band when you're on the road? And do you have any fan stories you could tell us?
Well, a lot. I mean, when I'm out on the road and and I run into people, and people are always very happy that I'm out there, that I'm continuing the legacy. I'm pushing it, the legacy. Also, but still within form, trying to be do something also different. Because I don't think my dad would have been happy to try to do the same thing or copy anything. And I mean, it would be hard to do anyway, because from the time from the early from 2000 to even now, I mean, it's everything is so much different in the music business. Any case, so doing crowdfunding and all this and social media, these are all new forms to help push. And I think this is helping, actually. I think this is kind of a good marriage for Weather Report, all this new way and beginning stages, because again, it's like when Weather Report came about, it was new. The music business was probably at its peak, I would almost say, but there was still at that time open to new ideas and to new ways. And I think with social media and all the technology that's going on now, it's kind of like that. So when I run into people on the road and they tell me, "Hey, I just saw a video, man, of Joe in the early days of playing with Cannonball, and can I send you this link?" And I mean, I laugh because I'd say, "Man, I wonder what my dad would think right now if somebody would say, 'Hey, man, I saw the." Can I send you these links? Can I take a photo of you, post it on Facebook? All these things. And because that's what happens when I'm on the road. I mean, people, they like when we were in Croatia, and a lot of people, I took like the 15, 20 pictures with people to put on their Facebook page, to say, and they give me photos. The one guy gave me a photograph of, I think, of one of the last of the show, my dad's last show, his last performance in Hungary. The guy gave me a photo of him waving to the crowd, and he gave his explanation of the story of that photo, and I thought it's pretty deep. So I mean, a lot of them, some people cry. It's amazing to me. I mean, they even cry when they talk about it. And a lot of people are very. It's amazing to see how impacted, I guess, Weather Report or my dad were to some of these people. So there's a lot of stories out there, very personal stories. Some. I don't know if I could use any of them, but they kind of paint. They help create the palette. It helps create the palette to put everything in perspective on not only on the film for Weather Report, but also on the film for my dad as well. So it's just another resource, I should say. And a lot of them are, most of them, I have to say, are very. They're very heartfelt. They're very sincere. You can tell that they're just people, man. And they were impacted, by music.
Yeah. I think when I unmute, it comes across in the middle. Okay, there we go. So, I think it's. As I've been working on the Weather Report project, I've seen we've added nearly 100,000 fans. People just kind of come out of the woodwork, and suddenly all these people are supporting, and we see a lot of photos, we see a lot of personal stories that come from fans. So really, this is as much a story about those two creators, of course, Joe and Wayne, but also about the experience of the fans who were part of that kind of long journey. Because if not for the fans, if not for the endless years of downbeats, top jazz artists for like 7 or 8 years running, these guys just continually dominated, right, with the fans, and so it seemed like that was a big motivation for the group to keep going, because there was always a fan base there to follow them. And you were young at the time growing up. Do you have any sort of recollections as to seeing this fan base and going to shows from your younger years when you were like around in high school when Heavy Weather hit, no?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, sure, I have tons of stories. I told one guy on the radio interview I did that when Heavy Weather came out, it jumped my popularity in high school like 200%. So that was kind of cool. So I had a good time in high school. Because I was just a jock before then, and and I was top jock actually. But when Weather Report, when Heavy Weather came out, my status went up like it skyrocketed. So I was happy about that. And it was also funny because that's at a time when we're talking music industry was thriving, man, and you had groups and radio stations. They weren't as generically formatted like they are now, where one moment you can be listening to Earth, Wind & Fire, and the next you'll be listening to Carole King, and the next Miles Davis, and then the next Hall & Oates, and then Weather Report. I mean, it was cool, actually. It was a great time, mid-'70s. And, of course, there's lots of stories. I mean, all these guys that came to the house, and, I remember the first time Peter Erskine, when he came to the house, when he first got in the band. I mean, and Peter is close. I mean, Peter's only 7 years older than me. So, so I kind of connected with him already then. Plus, I was a drummer back in those days myself. So, that was also another connection. And when Jocko too, because Jocko was young and he was closer to me than the other guys. And we used to play basketball in Pasadena House, and you know, he was pretty athletic, Jocko. And we played frisbee and stuff, and he was cool, you know. Um, so I have, you know, I've all, you know, and then by the time, you know, even when Omar, Hakeem, and Victor they came in, it was that was also another new chapter. You know, things were changing, music was changing, the business was changing, a lot of things were changing at that time. I was already in college by that time when Omar and Victor came in. So for me, plus I was on the national team, track and field. We boycotted that year, so it's almost meaningless. But so I was away. You know, I was doing my athletic thing, and I would come in, you know, every once in a while, and I would see those guys. And you know, when they came, I went to San Jose State on a track scholarship, and when Weather Report came, played at San Jose State. Again, it was like, you know, all of a sudden everybody knew me on campus, man. And San Jose is like, you know, 40,000 students of that campus, a big campus. So that was like, yeah, 1981, and but it was an exciting time. And you know, I have everybody was different. You know, all the guys were different, but they were very similar. And I had my time with each of them.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I just wanted everybody here to get a perspective of your experience growing up, because you're telling the story of the band in many respects, you know, from the inside. Well, in all respects from the inside. It's really exciting that you're able to have grown up with this, to be really close to it with your father, and then seeing it, you know, come together through all those years. And some of the fans are interested in understanding kind of, are you going to be interviewing like friends of your father, and, you know, understanding more about not only Joe but about Wayne, not just from their musical impact, but it sounds like some fans are interested in knowing about them as people. And then maybe you can reflect on the documentary you're doing now on your father, and kind of go into some details as to how you're talking about or telling the story about Joe as a person.
Yeah, well, you know, that's another interesting side, because you know, my dad used to always tell me that you can be whoever you are on the outside, but you're still going to be yourself on the inside. So being a musician, an athlete, that's secondary. You know, who are you as a person is what really counts. And that's what he used to, I mean, I grew up with this instilled. And, you know, that's why he was kind of just a regular guy, actually, you know, my dad, because he didn't believe in all that celebrity hype stuff. He just didn't like it, you know. Even when we moved out to California, you know, he didn't really want to move out to California because of, you know, the way it is. But it was important to do it at that time. You know, the film I'm doing on my dad, a lot of that, and that's what makes it a little bit also challenging, because you know, it's so intertwined with him, with Weather Report. So, you know, I've interviewed people for that documentary, which is called Joe Zawinul, An American Dream. You know, people that were just regular people that knew him as it had nothing to do with music, because that tried to shape who Joe was outside of music, and why the music itself came out that he expressed. It came out the way it did as that person, because, like, again, as I said, you are who you are. You can't escape that. And who you are, that's how you're going to play. You know, and he's Italian. I mean, if you're like, in other words, if you're, you know, if you're a greedy person, selfish, that's how you're going to play. You know, if you're an open-minded guy, kind of relaxed, that's how you're going to be. So when I interview some of these people, and a lot of them I tried to get, I mean, some of them are not around, unfortunately, but you know, I was able to actually find back in Austria 2 people that actually went to grade school with him. So they're still around. You know, they're like 80 years old. you know, and I interviewed them, and they talk about the early days when Joe was in grade school, at 10 years old. I didn't hear. I mean, I used to hear the stories from him directly, but when you hear a story about your dad, when your dad is telling you a story about himself when he was 10, there's always little embellishments, But when you hear from other people telling the story, they don't embellish anything. They just tell you how it really was. So that's really cool to do that. And I also think it's important to have that. And you know what? He wouldn't have liked it if I was to do a film and I'm only talking to musicians, because he always thought most musicians were kind of boring, So he always thought, people outside were interesting, and that's part of the life experience. That's why he liked talking and meeting people, and that's why he didn't want to talk about music, because people would ask him, it was this, that, but he liked to talk about other stuff. Hardly ever talked about music. We never talked about music, Music was always there in the house. That was part of the thing, but we never discussed it, Every once in a while, if he was doing a record, or he would ask me what I thought, and if I didn't like it, I would say, nah, I didn't like it, and then we'd get into a debate, about stuff. But that's normal, But if you met him and you started to talk about music and, hey, what kind of instrument, man, that would be a turnoff, and he would just walk away from that. But if you started to meet him and you talked about, hey, man, did you see this film? Or did you check out who's this boxer? Or did you check out that football match the other day? Then he'd be into it, because for him, that was life.
Yeah, and no doubt. And we've had the opportunity to hang out with Wayne, and it's the same thing with Wayne. Wayne's into sci-fi. He's in all these other things. He doesn't want to sit around and talk about music, right?
Right, of course not, And I get that, because me, myself, as a awesome musician, I hardly like to talk about music either, And I get that, because there's other things outside of that, and all those elements help express them as artists. They're influenced by all these things that surround them.
And that's what's cool about Weather Report, is that Weather Report really, the music was so impactful, but there was such a cultural impact given where jazz was at the time. And I posted some stuff on Facebook kind of berating Ken Burns, who decided not to really cover fusion, or, call it what you want, or all the years with Weather Report and how important these guys were. We have that famous quote from the Downbeat guy in 2000. He said, Weather Report was the most important band in the last 30 years, and they're still the most important jazz group of the last 40 years. I mean, they really had incredible impact. And it seems like with this documentary, these stories have not been told yet, and it's really exciting that you're doing the documentary, Tony, and that we're bringing it to the fans here. With people that you're interviewing, some of the fans want to know who other musicians. Somebody said Sting, and the answer to that is yes. We want to get Sting. We put some feelers out to get him. He had his own fusion band and was playing Weather Report music back in the day. There's a lot of other people that Tony's interviewed, including like Bill Cosby for the Zavanel, for Tony's dad's documentary, for Joe's documentary. And, of course, there's some elements from that we can use for Weather Report. And then there's a lot of new people that have stories that we really want to connect with, as you point out, like even Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the great basketball player, who was a huge Weather Report fan and a big supporter of Weather Report. So there's other people culturally that we're going to hear from in this documentary, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, my ultimate goal, to be, I don't know if it'll work out like this, but if we can get more people that weren't necessarily musicians, I would think that would be much more interesting, than I mean, the musicians will be interesting because they'll give their insight from a musical standpoint. But that's one dimension. When you talk about the people itself, that's more three-dimensional. And that's what's going to make, in most films or documentaries, I should say, interesting when it's more, when it's, I would say in this case, 3D, in 3D, you know, when you have more dimensions to the characters. In this case, the characters being the people of Weather Report. I think because all these people are going to have their own stories, and they were influenced by the band, and they were impacted, and they love the band, and they're going to tell their stories, and it's going to help paint this picture to show really what this not only the band itself, but also the time when the music business was a music business, you know. Because now, you know, I'm sorry to say, but it's really not it's not a business anymore. I mean, it's a different type of business, I should say, but it's not music like it used to be, you know. And I think when you go back and you listen to some of the tracks in Weather Report, you know, it always brings me, any good song always brings you back to that time, you know. So, I think it's going to be interesting to hear from other people that weren't necessarily musicians, but they were artists in other areas, you know, actors, even or regular people, you know, politicians, and to hear their insight of what they felt and what they saw through the band.
Great. So this is our first chat, and I'm just getting the fans and everybody warmed up to this concept. I think maybe we actually figured out the technology too, that the little idiosyncrasies of Google Hangouts. So I think we're going to do this again, everyone. I want to, what we'll do for the next time is we'll get questions beforehand. I know we have some questions like about Scott Henderson. Somebody quoted Scott saying, Joe was the greatest musician on the planet, which, you know, many people believe like what Scott thought, that Joe was indeed. Somebody talked about Joe's love for boxing. Everybody knew that, Joe, Jocko, those guys all love boxing, and there's a lot of really interesting insight coming in from fans. So, Tony, do you think we can do this again in the near future?
Yeah, I'd love to do it. I think it's a great idea, and it's a lot of fun, and I'm happy to do it.
All right, cool. So everybody, just if you go to Indiegogo and you click categories and you click music, it's really exciting because the top the top link there is Weather Report. So right now we are totally killing it with this documentary. We're the top music project on Indiegogo. We were actually on the homepage of Indiegogo last week, which means, you know, we're one of the top campaigns, top 6 or 7 campaigns. So every fan that gets, most people here have already donated and have already been helping out this documentary. I did post the link in the description of the video so you can see it. It's right at the top. And as I said, you go to Indiegogo as well. And what we'll do is I'll post something on Facebook and send a note out to everyone for the next, we'll try to do this in about a week after the new year. We'll have another chat, get more questions in because there's a lot more people want to know. And that should be it. Thank you, everyone, for donating. Thank you for being part of this project. Any final words from you, Tony?
No, just again, thanks. I want to thank everybody out there supporting this. Keep the support going, and we're looking forward to a great collaboration with the fans.
All right. Thank you, Tony, and thank you to all the fans. Most of these guys, you're all technical people, so it must have been frustrating to watch us go through these hoops to make this work. So thank you, everyone, for putting up with that, and we appreciate your love for the band and your support. We're signing off for now. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Happy New Year. Thanks. Thanks, Danny.
Thank you, Tony. Happy New Year.